Get ready to discover some of the most actionable DevOps techniques and tooling, including performance and reliability for some of the world's smartest engineers. Hey, I'm Joe Colantonio, host of the DevOps Toolchain podcast, and my goal is to help you create DevOps Toolchain awesomeness. Hey, it's Joe, and welcome to another episode of the TestSkill DevOps Toolchain. And today we'll be talking with Ivan Merrill all about streamlining the DevOps experience. If you don't know, Ivan is the head of solutions engineering at Fiberplane, based in Amsterdam. And before joining Fiberplane, Ivan actually spent about 15 years at large financial enterprises, helping their teams really understand the power of monitoring and observability. So he really knows his stuff. Also, while leading large-scale development of monitoring tools on rather important banking systems, he has a bunch of experience that I think you're really going to get a lot of value from. So you really want to stick around if you want to learn how to streamline your DevOps focus with SLOs and all these types of cool capabilities that Fiberplane has. You don't want to miss this episode. Check it out. Hey, if your app is slow, it could be worse than an error. It could be frustrating. And in my experience, frustrated users don't last long. But since slow performance is sudden, it's hard for standard error monitoring tools to catch. That's why Bugsnag, one of the best production visibility solutions in the industry, has a way to automatically watch for these issues: real user monitoring. It detects and reports real user performance data in real time, so you can quickly identify lags. Plus, get the context of where the lags are and how to fix them. Don't rely on frustrated user feedback. Find out for yourself. Go to bugsnag.com and click on the free trial button. No credit card required. Support the show and check them out. Hey, Ivan, welcome to the Guild.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. So I always ask everyone, is there anything in your bio that I missed that you want the Guild to know more about?
I don't think so. I think that kind of pretty much sums it up, really. Kind of, get far too passionate about monitoring and observability. That's kind of my jam, something I kind of fell into, and been doing it for a long time now. So, yeah.
Love it. So what drew you to Fiberplane then? What made you want to get a Fiberplane and really build something?
So honestly, the first thing is that it's a really cool product. I really like the idea. So Fiberplane's kind of core product is collaborative notebooks for SREs, and having been in large incidents and seeing that kind of every team has their own kind of data source, and every team is trying to go away and check their own things kind of in private, and then kind of actually that kind of that ability to collaborate and everything was quite hard, and you invariably ended up kind of getting lots of links to data and screenshots and things posted in your chat tool of choice, and that was quite hard to kind of follow things through, right, and understand what was going on. And I think just the idea of having the whole incident kind of investigated in the open is a great way to build trust amongst teams, which is so important.
Absolutely. So you have over 15 years of experience. I think SRE is newer than that. So well, what has the evolution been? Like, I know, like, when we talk about observability, I used to be involved with performance testing. It was more like application performance monitoring, but that seems to have morphed. So any thoughts on SRE and this new kind of wave of monitoring?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that always kind of interests me with a lot of this stuff is that a lot of the things that we're talking about in the SRE world, a lot of the principles have actually being practiced by a lot of really large scale organizations, particularly in the banking world, where reliability clearly, it comes, a failure comes with potentially, a heavy fine and, front page news. So, things like, chaos engineering that, we used to kind of, that was part of our kind of, go live process, where someone would try and break your thing, and see how it failed. And you needed to kind of work out, resiliency. We used to do regular, site switches between kind of one data center, all of these things that are kind of reliability practices that we've been doing for many years. But I think SRE really kind of codifies a lot of this stuff and makes it more accessible to people that aren't working in these kind of huge organizations that don't have the resources to spend on this thing. But in terms of the evolution, I mean, in the monitoring and observability world, when I first started, it was all infrastructure monitoring, right? It was kind of CPU Patrol, and it was what we used back in the day, BMC tool, and it was very much checking an amount of things. Like run a check: is this CPU above a threshold? No, everything's good, and you do that, over and over again for forever, right? And it was very, very hard to equate anything kind of user experience wise. And then obviously we kind of got into the APM world, and that was great. And I used to go around and say to everyone, your users don't care what your CPU metric is like, right? They care on their experience. And it was, interesting to listen to that real user monitoring thing at the beginning of this thing, because that was one of the things that we were interested in. We were trying to roll out, and that's been really great. And I think that focus is absolutely right. And now just the evolution from me into observability is really big, because it's no longer become this check-based thing. Application performance management is great, and you do generate a lot of data, and you've got kind of different aspects to it. But the idea from observability is the understanding of the state of your system, and being able to be more interrogative, is that a word, interrogative, of your system is really powerful, right? And I think it just also moves on the way that people think about these things. It's not, these tools and, these practices is not just something to do in an incident, but actually, driving a lot of other, really important, processes, engineering processes and stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it almost seems like a mindset shift. Like you said, we used to look at CPU usage and disk usage and memory, but now it's more users. Do you think that's why one of the reasons for that is we're moving towards like cloud native type applications, where before we had systems under our control where we know this can handle this, but now who knows like where we're scaling up, what containers are scaling up, what services we're using that are outside our control. And we're like, I can't even test this if I wanted to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we've mentioned the word DevOps, which I think means by law we have to talk about the kind of cattle versus pets analogy, right? I mean, it's such a great word, but it's exactly that, right? I mean, I think there is this, the whole kind of the architecture of what we're running, right? CPU, memory monitoring and stuff like that. It didn't matter so much back in the day when there was, a sysadmin that, understood their pet, right? And, when I do talks, I literally have a picture of my cat, Stephen, right? And it's like, I know what time he wakes up, what time he likes to go to bed, what time he likes his meals, if I give him a little, tickle under the chin, to, look at, I know his behavior, right? And that is, very well understood. And the mental model that we can have of these systems when they were, much smaller is more complete, right? And I've been fascinated looking at some of the things around kind of reliable systems, and Dr. Richard Cook, kind of how complex, complex systems fail, and all of this stuff is really, really interesting. And we are moving into this space of having complex systems where no one has a complete mental model, and that requires a fundamental shift in how we approach things and what we do to actually be able to detect if they're not working as expected, where and why and everything else like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So is that another reason why we see a rise in like service level agreements or objectives? We've had them before, but it seems like they really are transforming the way we may have done alerting traditionally. So maybe you could talk, I know you've written a few blog posts on this as well. Could you dive into a little bit about like SLOs, how we can understand them better, how they maybe be the preferred choice for modern businesses or something like that?
So service level objectives, SLOs, as seen in, the SRE book originally and everything else like that. I like to think of them as a bar of quality that a team chooses to hold itself up to, right? I'm building a system. What is the bar of quality that I hold myself up to? That's always kind of how I personally have chosen to explain it. And I think that's an important thing to think about, because, service level agreements, they're things that you put into contracts. You sign them with your customers. They are often legal. When I was running a monitoring team, we had vendors, that we use. They gave me an SLA. but SLOs are what we choose to hold ourselves up to. And that is a very important distinction. And I think they are, if you're done right, they are based on what is important to your customer, right? And so what you're trying to say is, give me some SLIs, service level indicators, of the really important interactions that my customer has with my service, my application. And what is the bar of quality that we hold ourselves up to for those interactions? And there are a number of different things that you can use here, kind of the number of errors that you serve to your customers, your number of the latency, in fact, are two of the most obvious ones. And it's about not being perfect, because we all talk about there is no service that's 100% available, right? It might be for a short period of time, but it's impossible to keep that up. So you can't have 100% perfectness, but you can have we often talk about kind of 4 nines or 5 nines or however many nines you want. So we want maybe 99.99% of our customers get a successful request. And that is the bar of quality that we wish to hold ourselves up to. And what it's doing is it's kind of giving us a way to say, with every single interaction that our customer has, was this good or bad? Did they get a 200 okay, or did they get a kind of 500 or above? Or, whatever is the way that you choose to think about it. And that's, again, really important. And one of the things that I found most powerful about kind of going around to engineering teams and implementing them is it's forcing people to have this level of thought that perhaps hasn't happened before. They might have thought, we've got nice HTTP error codes. That's great. But which ones do we care about? So, a common one, like if we're getting a customer typing in their password wrong, that, I've seen people have that, pop up as an error, but that isn't an error. That's, so that HTTP code that you've provided there, I mean, it's appropriate for that, but we don't want to judge that as an actual error to us. So we need to, you kind of exclude that from our calculations. And what are the things that we can definitively say are good? And, what does that leave that are essentially definitively bad? And that is a really powerful concept that then you can apply through and start measuring and, do all kinds of crazy things once you do it. So yeah, it's a hugely powerful concept, and, literally books have been written on it. But in a simple level, it's a bar of quality that you choose to hold yourselves up to.
I love that term, bar of quality. So how do we know where we have our SLOs aligned with the customer really needs? Sometimes we have thoughts of, this is what our customer wants and need. And sometimes we get so focused on that we don't even change based on what we're observing in production. So how do you make sure that they're aligned with your customers?
Yeah. With difficulty. I mean, it's not easy. I think the first thing to recognize in this space is that SLOs aren't permanent. They evolve, and they evolve as your service evolves, right? I mentioned briefly, Dr. Richard Cook, who always talked about humans being the adaptive part of the system. We are constantly introducing change to our system, right? We have new features, releases, changing our architecture maybe. So with that, it's right that our service level objectives change. If we add something that makes it more reliable, and we consistently see that we are more reliable, then we, can maybe increase our service level objective if we think we can, regularly meet that. But ultimately, it's about being not perfect, but good enough. And that will depend on service to service. And that will be, some interactions with customers. I mean, ultimately, what we're trying to do is to make our service reliable enough. There is this, great idea that I really kind of firmly believe in, that reliability is any product's number one feature, right? And it's this idea of, if it's not reliable, then users won't trust it. And if they don't trust it, then they're going to look for alternatives. And, and if your system has got no users, then, what's the point in it existing? So, we need to make sure that it's reliable enough. Now, what is reliable enough? That is a very difficult question, and I don't think really, I can provide any single answer, because it will be different for different systems. I mean, I've actually known in the banking world that some services provided a response too quickly. If you're kind of thinking about, kind of a decision around, are we going to accept this person as a customer? Yeah. And someone receives no. That way, then they would. I don't think I believe the computer here, right? It said no, like, so I don't believe it. So in actual fact, in this particular case, right, having a really quick, an SLO that's really, got really low latency is entirely unimportant, because your customer doesn't, in actual fact, you want to almost add in a delay in this time, right? So this is entirely dependent around the customer interaction. And I think part of the thing from the engineering world, and if it is engineering people that are kind of pushing out the SLOs and things, is talk to other people in your business. Talk to your product owners, talk to your marketing people, talk to your, customer support people. This should be a thing that, it's a bar of quality that, you are providing, but it's, and it's what your team can provide, but it needs to be done in conjunction with other people, because it's no point me saying that, my bar of quality is, 4 nines, but actually our marketing team are expecting 5 nines and are talking about, we're being the most reliable, whatever. So yeah, there's not a right answer, but it needs to be in conjunction with everyone else. And yeah, normally I think, it's pretty quick to find out if your users aren't happy. Yeah.
No, it's a great point, especially like you said, that example you gave, the customer, what they're expecting. And even though it is technically slow, it may not be slow because, like you said, that's a great, I love that example. So how do we get this information though fed into our SRE teams and our DevOps teams? Is it all hinged on observability and how it's baked into our infrastructure and applications, and how we're able to get this data to be able to come up with these better and better SLOs?
You're asking an observability person whether it's all based on observability. I'm going to say yes, it absolutely is. Always, observability is the answer to everything. Yeah, I mean, let's face it, right? Was it, I'm not sure it's entirely true, but was it Robert McNamara made that quote, what you don't measure, you can't improve. There is that quite famous quote, isn't there? And whether that's true or not is, up for debate, but it's certainly very hard to measure or to improve something that you don't measure, right? So I think, yeah, there has to be a grounding in it. Now, that's not to say that you need, a full-on, absolutely perfect monitoring system. To me, fundamentally, for an SLO, for the actual kind of the maths bit of the SLO, you need a way of deciding for everything that you're measuring. So normally that's user requests. Is something good or bad? Because ultimately what you're trying to do, and one of the most powerful aspects of service level objectives, is providing a common language to the entire business of, reliability and whether we were reliable enough. And, in the DevOps world, that means, actually aligning devs and ops on, was this good or bad? So at a kind of a simplistic level, if you have the ability to, take whatever is your unit of measurement and say this one was good and this one was bad, then you have enough. But hopefully, that will then evolve into maybe more kind of granular SLOs or kind of, better quality SLOs or anything else like that. I mean, it's certainly something you can start off with quite simply and then evolve as, you get more experience.
Great. So, last time I spoke with the folks at Fiberplane, I think it was like November. And I noticed recently you had a new observability, it looked like a feature called AutoMetrics. So, we talked about SLOs, why observability is so important. So is AutoMetrics one of the solutions that someone can use? I believe it's open source as well to help them with the observability.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's kind of part of the reason that we kind of created it, invented it, and put it out there for the world to use. So when speaking to lots of different companies about, kind of the situation for them and their organization around, monitoring observability, how well their applications were instrumented, we kept seeing similar kind of patterns of issues, right? Actually, companies were struggling to get good instrumentation in the first place because maybe developers were unsure about how to do it or didn't know what to instrument. Even things like naming your metrics is difficult. And then particularly, once you've got those metrics, how do you go about querying them? There's, there's so many different tools. Each of them has their own domain specific language, and everything else like that. So what AutoMetrics is a function-based metrics for a few different languages. So what you do is you decorate your functions within your code base, within your IDE, and for that you automatically get the number of invocations of that function, the number of errors from those invocations, and the latency of the invocations. And actually, it's a very because it's quite a kind of curated way of doing this, because the metrics that are created are given a very specific name. You can actually then follow it through. If you know the metrics and you know the number of errors and the number of invocations, then you can start to work out a percentage on the success rate. And if you know the latency and you're given a latency target, then again, you can start to work out, are we meeting that target? Which then means that SLOs can be very quickly generated based on those metrics, and alerts based off those SLOs. So it's a very kind of, great way to get started with observability, a really great way to kind of get, some pretty good observability very simply. And I think there's a couple of really, really big benefits to me, but one of the things that I really like is that it takes away observability being this kind of this problem to overcome, this thing that you need to do, this thing that requires a lot of effort, because actually, it's really simple to go and decorate your functions, with the AutoMetrics decorator, and then, to not have to think about anything else, but from that, get good quality metrics, that particularly metrics that make sense. I briefly touched on mental models at the beginning of this, but, for someone that is, writing the code, that is building the system, their mental model is based up on, how they interact with it. And that's their code, right? That is the functions that they write. So providing metrics that are in that kind of paradigm, that make sense to them, that, align with their mental model, means there isn't really translation to be done between someone writing code and, the metrics that are output. And that's incredibly powerful in helping people kind of quickly, easily consume those metrics and actually do useful things with them.
Now, this just popped in my head. Is this also a way for SREs to maybe open up communication better with the developers? Because I assume developers are one decorating their functions, so it almost opens up a dialogue between SREs and developers. It's almost like a backhanded way to get them to talk to one another. Like I said, I just popped in my head.
Absolutely. I think it's, certainly in my experience, it can be quite hard to go out to some of the engineering teams and say, you need to instrument your code. It's not actually a very fun task, right? No one really kind of wants to go through and say, today we're going to be kind of adding metrics to our code base. Woohoo. That's not something that, people really, so being able to kind of, as and when you, touch your, code base, maybe you're refactoring some code, maybe you're adding a new feature, but just being able to, add in this decorator nice and simply, get the metrics means that it's really easy, but it enables, as I said, well, firstly, you're getting some really great metrics that make sense to both the SREs and the developers. I think that it helps the SREs understand the code base better, because the metrics that they're getting, that they're consuming are, based on the functions of the code. Again, it's this idea of helping people speak the same language, right? Which is really powerful.
Absolutely. So how does this all tie in then to, I think one of the main objectives of Fiberplane is to help people kind of streamline their focus, especially prioritize service level objectives and SLO capabilities like that. So what I guess, obviously with AutoMetrics and all this stuff baked in, it's going to help you prioritize or get more information to be able to prioritize. But is there anything else that folks will be able to do with Fiberplane that help them with the service level objectives or anything around this area?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, SLOs are the basis of so many kind of things. So many kind of important things. If done rightly, they're not just a way to say we're reliable enough or we're not reliable enough. And we briefly touched on the fact that you can base your alerting on the back of that. You've got alert fatigue is a very real problem in the SRE world and everything else. But in terms of streamlining, kind of the overall process and developers and DevOps things and everything else like that. It's also about, how would I put this? Well, firstly, there is a prioritization, right? You're able to kind of make a better understanding of, do I need to prioritize reliability or do I not? And with the Fiberplane notebooks, you've got a continual idea so there's a notebook, you've got an incident, you're going through, you can understand, hopefully you've got your application instrumented with AutoMetrics and everything. So you can see, things like your error rate and therefore your burn rate, which is another concept maybe for another day, kind of going into the complexities of service level objectives. But you're starting to see kind of which incidents are costing you a lot of time, a lot of money, and you've got I think of the Fiberplane notebooks as kind of incident artifacts, right? Kind of looking at, as you're investigating an incident, you are recording that investigation as you go through, which I think is really cool. And as I said, one of the reasons I kind of, wanted to get involved with this company. So, if you're doing all that stuff, then you can start to really make a more data-driven kind of decision around, do we need to invest in maybe our release process, because the last 5 incidents that we've had that have taken so much time have been, around releases. And so is it right that we put in maybe more automated testing earlier on as we go, through our continuous integration cycles and all that kind of stuff. So SLOs start off as this thing about kind of measuring reliability. But once you start to kind of bring them in and use them in a more thoroughly throughout the organization, as you get more mature with them, as you start using, them as a basis for, do I have an incident, investigating those incidents, understanding, what is the cause of this incident, what is causing us to breach our SLO target, then, they become such a wider, more powerful thing that can really bring a huge amount of benefit. So yeah, many things come. I mean, I could talk about this for a long time, but definitely there are lots of opportunities there.
Absolutely. So it sounds like a lot of data, just like performance testing. You have a lot of this data, and sometimes it's hard to tell, okay, what does this mean, or which one should I prioritize? So any tips on how to turn maybe some of these complex SLOs and metrics into more clear, pretty much actionable insights? Is there any sort of visualization baked in or anything like that to help the person figure these out really quickly or triage quickly?
Yeah. So certainly, if we come back to things like AutoMetrics, there is an open source bit. Part of that open source project is what's called Explorer, which is a really nice simple UI to say, these are your service level objectives. These are the ones that are on track. These are the ones that are off target. And again, don't forget that each one of your service level objectives is should be, if done correctly, based on customer experience, right? So, and it comes down to a percentage, right? It comes down to a very kind of simple percentage. So you kind of, if you've got 2 SLOs and one of them is at 95% and one of them is at 97%, it is a pretty kind of clear thing. This is part of the common language that they provide to go, one is better than the other. So yeah, there is, things like that. And actually there are even some, Grafana dashboards, provided there as well. So kind of once you kind of get to the point of, you're collecting the data, there's a number of different ways that you can really, visualize it and just become, I think everything is easier with a picture, right? So, getting that clear view is really important. So yeah, the Explorer, Grafana dashboards, there you go.
Awesome. Okay, Ivan, before we go, is there one piece of actionable advice you can give to someone to help them with their DevOps SRE efforts? And what's the best way to find, contact you, or learn more about Fiberplane?
Okay. Quite. So the first one is probably the easier one. So a couple of things. We've talked a lot about AutoMetrics. That's autometrics.dev. Get involved. As said, open source. We'd really like to see people on there. Come join our Discord. And then you can go to fiberplane.com to sign up for the notebooks. in terms of one bit of advice for SREs and things, I think one that I've given before is, this is quite a new practice, right? And I think that, we all have to understand that we are continually learning this, right? And I think, don't be afraid of failure, and, understand that that's part of the learning process. I think that, service level objectives, really do kind of epitomize that, where you might start off with one service level objective, but it will continually evolve, and you should continually evolve. And, that's kind of something that we must all accept, right? I mean, I always like to think that, reliability in our tech world is pretty new compared to kind of aviation or, kind of some of the other, health and everything else like that. And a lot of the people that we're taking inspiration from are from that world, and they have an awful lot more experience with it. A lot to learn from, and we are constantly evolving it. So don't be scared of it. Give it a go, and, understand that it probably won't be perfect first time, but that's okay.
And for links of everything of value we covered in this DevOps Toolchain show, head on over to testguild.com/P132. Remember, latency is the silent killer of your app. Don't rely on frustrated user feedback. You can know exactly what's happening and how to fix it with Bugsnag from SmartBear. See it for yourself. Go to bugsnag.com and click the free trial button. No credit card required. So that's it for this episode of the DevOps Toolchain show. I'm Joe. My mission is to help you succeed in creating end-to-end full-stack DevOps toolchain awesomeness. As always, test everything and keep the good. Cheers. Hey, thanks again for listening. If you're not already part of our awesome community of 27,000 of the smartest testers, DevOps, and automation professionals in the world, we'd love to have you join the fam at testguild.com. And if you're in the DevOps automation software testing space, or you're a test tool provider and want to offer real-world value that can improve the skills or solve a problem for the Guild community, I'd love to hear from you. Head on over to testguild.info and let's make it happen.